Today on City Chat, the month of February brings to mind thoughts of Valentine's Day cards, jewelry, candy, and of course matters of the heart. Battalion Chief Steve Martin with the Columbus Division of Fire is with us today to talk a little bit about the heart. So Chief, what are we talking about today exactly? Romance, dating tips, maybe some marital advice that I can take home to Sean?
Well, that's not really in my wheelhouse, but February has also been deemed by the American Heart Association as being the Heart Month. February is Heart Month. So we want to talk about a little bit of heart health, and specifically we are working on an initiative to make Columbus one of the most survivable cities to have a heart attack.
Okay, so what is sudden cardiac arrest and how serious of a threat is it?
Sudden cardiac arrest is different than a little bit than a heart attack. A heart attack would be when you have a vein that's blocked off and your heart's not getting blood the way that it should and part of the heart dies. Sudden cardiac arrest is when the electrical current that goes through the heart that keeps it pumping at a regular rate, something happens to that electrical current. And somebody could end up talking to you 1 minute and then the very next minute they're laying on the ground. And the only way that we can reverse it is to get another electrical shock through the heart to try to reverse that.
Is this mostly an issue with people with specific health risks like obesity or if they're a smoker or high cholesterol?
Not necessarily, and so it can be deceiving that way a little bit. Some people think, well, I work out, I'm at the gym 5 times a week, I eat nothing but healthy vegetarian food, and you can live a perfect, healthy life, and it could still happen. There are some factors like maybe hereditary issues or things like that, but it can strike anybody. And 2/3 of the people that experience sudden cardiac arrest have no precondition that would let somebody know that that was going to occur.
Those are really high numbers. If it's not really about our diet or working out and being healthy, what can we do to survive a heart attack?
So the survival really is dependent on others. So if I go down with a sudden cardiac arrest, I'm hoping that people around me are willing to participate in my recovery. And the 3 things that we're asking people to do are know how to do CPR, and either certified or hands-only CPR, which is really all that's required right now. And the other thing is to know about AEDs and be familiar with them, and maybe where they're at in relationship to where your workplace is or where you hang out a lot. And then the third thing is the Pulse Point app. Download it on your phone, it's free, and it will notify you if somebody needs CPR help in your immediate vicinity, where you could be close enough that you could possibly be there before Columbus Fire can arrive. As far as CPR, we would encourage everybody to go out to the Columbus Division of Fire website. You can put in your Google search Columbus Fire CPR classes and it'll pop right up. But there are CPR lessons that are given by both American Red Cross and American Heart Association. It's usually a 4-hour class. It'll teach you CPR for adults, youth, and infants. And they'll also touch on AEDs. And that'll get you a card. But if you don't have time just yet to get that, what we would love for everybody to know is hands-only CPR, we call it. I kind of call it combat CPR. But basically, let's be real, in 2019 and for the last 10 years or so, to put our mouths on a stranger is not real desirable for mouth-to-mouth resuscitation as part of that CPR. So we teach it now, and if you take a class, you might get a mask or a barrier, so we could teach that. But hands-only CPRs, there's no touching your mouth on the patient. All you have to do is chest compressions. And we have determined that by putting your hands on a person's chest and giving compressions to the heart at 100 beats a minute, 2 inches deep on an adult, that up and down motion of the chest will enable oxygen to get in through the mouth and into the lungs enough that there's enough oxygen to keep the brain and the rest of the organs alive until paramedics can get there.
If you don't do mouth to mouth, is there was it new data that came out that hands only CPR is just as effective, or do you have to push harder?
You don't have to push harder, and it's not quite as effective as actually delivering oxygen or air to a person, but it's enough that they can survive. And that's what we really want to do. They have to get that shock of electric to the heart on a sudden cardiac arrest. So we want to keep them alive and keep the brain oxygenated long enough to be able to deliver that. So the way that it can be delivered is if you've called 911 and we have paramedics arrive on scene in an engine company or an ambulance, they carry monitors on board and they can put paddles or patches on the patient and deliver that shock. The other way is now everybody has basically the same tool available if they are somewhere around what we call the AED.
Because I know that I had a CPR, I took a CPR and AED course, but I think it expired. Do you have to renew it once a year, or can anyone use the AED, or is it?
That's a great question. So while we would encourage everybody, I believe a CPR class or card typically lasts a year to be certified. That certification is important if you are a professional healthcare provider or in childcare, like a babysitter or something, and you want to have that card and you want to keep it current. But not for a second do I want anybody to think that my card expired, I can't do CPR on anybody. Once you have that training, you can do it. And even if you haven't received the training with hands-only CPR, all we're asking you to do is be able to put your hands right on somebody's sternum, and like I said, just do those compressions at 100 beats a minute, which is kind of that song Staying Alive by the Bee Gees, or any other song that's 100 beats a minute, that kind of a pace, and just keep thumping on their chest. So it doesn't matter if you have a certification or training. Same with the AED. And the AEDs are designed that if you've never seen one, you can look at it, and in about 5 seconds, an adult of average intelligence can tell how to operate it.
So you brought in today a mannequin for us to kind of see how this AED kit works and how hands-on CPR would work. Would you care to demonstrate?
I would love to. So one of the big questions for AEDs people worry about was, I've never had a certification class. I don't know, never been trained with an AED. And so we want them not to be afraid. Ohio law says that if you're doing what is kind of in the instructions or whatever, you're covered if you're not doing anything egregious. So this is an example of an AED. They're small electrical devices. There's a big battery in them, and they've got a couple of patches. Sometimes they might have patches for kids and adults both. You'll find them like in little cabinets on the wall, and most of those cabinets will have some kind of a sign that says AED, so that you can look around like some would say fire extinguisher. So when you open it up, you'll see the box, you see a button, and like I said, these patches. The patches will have wires on them. The patches also have a nice pictogram indicating the position that they're to be placed onto the patient. So at times, we've had situations where this happens during the Columbus Marathon or the half marathon or something like that. So you want to make sure that the chest is dry. So you might have to remove a shirt and then take their shirt and dry their chest off. But these patches would just simply go where they're indicated. So this one, as you can see, goes over the left chest like that. And then this one goes on the rib cage to the right of the chest over here. And they'll stick on. And then this wire, they'll have a pretty easily identifiable place where the wire gets plugged in. And then you push a power button.
Analyzing rhythm. Everyone stand clear.
These patches monitor the electric current that the heart has or does not have.
Shock advised. Charging. Everyone stand clear. Everyone stand clear. Push the shock button.
So once I make sure nobody's touching the patient, then I'll go ahead and say I'm
push the shock button.
Delivering the charge or hitting the button.
Shock delivered. Begin 5 cycles of CPR.
So it'll tell you that. You might see the patient jump a little bit with that electrical shock, but it registers and it did not indicate a heartbeat, so it said start 5 cycles of CPR. so that you would continue to do CPR. In 5 cycles or 2 minutes later, you would take another pulse check and then hit your button again to start, and it would analyze again. So
this AED machine basically tells you everything that you need to do. You don't
1
need to...
minute and 30 seconds of CPR remain.
Wow.
So it's
Okay.
time, yeah. So I'm going to turn it off now, but so the AED will do the thinking for you. It basically allows you to be somewhat of a paramedic in heart matters, you know, for a sudden cardiac arrest. Now, if the person does not have a rhythm that would indicate that a shock needs to be delivered, it won't deliver a shock.
Okay.
So, and it won't charge anything so that you can't accidentally deliver a shock to somebody that doesn't need it.
Because that was, I had that question, like, what if you accidentally push the shock button and they don't need to be shocked, but this device just analyzes everything?
It does. And there's capacitors in here, so the capacitors will charge up to deliver that shock if it's needed. If it's not, it won't allow you to disperse a charge.
Oh my goodness.
So for that reason, the state law, there's a Good Samaritan law out there, so it's so hard to do any damage or do anything wrong that it encourages you to do the right thing and try. And as long as you try, then you're protected and nobody can come at you because you didn't have a card or were never trained.
That's really cool to know, and it's just so accessible. It's in every single building. Every single building, or?
We're trying to get there. So we have them in a lot. Now we're working on an AED registry for the city so that you would be able to find, online, you'd be able to see wherever they are. If you have one, we would encourage you to contact the fire department and let them know that you've installed one in your business or your building, your store. And, we'll make sure that it gets put in our computer system. But you're leading me into the third part of this, and this is this Pulse Point app. So if you have either kind of main smartphone available, you can find it in the app stores. It's called Pulse Point. You download that, you can then put in like the city that you're in. So in our case, it would be Columbus Fire would be who you're going to follow. And it's kind of passive in a way that if you're interested, you see the fire trucks go by down the street. You can look it up and see Pulse Point. You can see, oh, there's these trucks are going to this address or this area on a fire or car accident or a medical emergency. But the benefit of it is if you allow it to notify you of CPR alerts. We have certain call types, like unconscious person or possible heart attack or something, and they could say, well, this is a possible CPR issue, and the app will notify your phone if you are within 400 meters. Wow. So if you're close enough to help, now, so, we're down here in this wonderful building downtown, there could be something happening 2 floors below us, and we would have no idea because we're up here, it's quiet. But with that app, it would come up on our phone that somebody needs CPR. You would say, I just got done with this CPR class, I can help. And when you go down there, not only does it tell you somebody where they're at, but it would tell you there's an AED in this building and this is where it's located. So with the Pulse Point app, we can also register all the AEDs in Central Ohio.
So that's just a collaboration of just the public submitting into this app, like, we need help over here, someone just fell over and is...
No, the most important thing is to call 911. Okay. So that's a great question because the Pulse Point app operates off of our alarm office. I see. So as soon as we put the run card in and our paramedics are dispatched, and actually sometimes up to 30, 40 seconds before we're dispatched, that comes out on your phone. Wow. So you could end up being to a patient 2 or 3 minutes before our arrival. And let me tell you something about this sudden cardiac arrest. When the heart's not beating, the blood does not have oxygen that's getting to your brain. And every minute that the brain goes without oxygen reduces the chance of a recovery by 10%. So one of our best days, we can get to a patient within 4 to 5 minutes, which means they might have a 50 to 60% chance of recovery. But if you can make it to a patient in a minute, then their chance goes to 90% chance of recovery, just because you've given their brain that oxygen so much quicker than we can.
Was that one of the main reasons that fire departments came up with this app, just because they saw the importance of how, 10 seconds can make such a big difference?
It is a huge national thing that we're pushing right now. It's an agenda as far as bystander CPR. And you're going to start seeing a lot more of it. We're hoping to get the message out any way we can. But yes, to have the bystanders that perhaps see something participate in the CPR is so much more effective than even if they just call in and stand there and wait for us to get there. And that is how we can make Columbus one of the most survivable city to have a sudden cardiac arrest in the country if we can get people on board.
Even just thinking about a situation, if I saw someone later today or in the future that needed CPR, I am imagining that and just automatically like feeling kind of like flustered. Are there any tips that you have for bystanders as far as like calming your nerves down? Is that why the AED was, kind of invented, to just give you easy instructions to follow? Or
that, and I'll tell you something else about these smartphones that is really cool. If you can call 911 and put your phone on speaker and set it down next to the patient, our operators that answer the phone and work in our fire alarm office, they will walk you through step by step, and they will talk to you just like I'm talking to you, and they can keep time for you. And so they'll, now here's the beat, press, 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 and just having that extra voice coaching you through things can mean all the difference. And even with firefighters, we face a lot of overwhelming situations at times, but you kind of just go into this mode where I need to get some work done, and you get real focused on what needs to be done, and you don't get so overwhelmed as you think you might. And what we've seen is bystanders that are willing to help, they get that same way. They get real focused on what they're doing, and they do incredible things. And so while you and I sitting at a desk might think, oh, I could never do that, or I don't know if I have it, you can do it. Everybody can do it. And it's just magic when people participate that way.
Have you seen any actual results from bystanders using the Pulse Point app and them being able to save a life?
We have, and we are trying to get a lot of that information out when we can, but sometimes the patient that whose life is saved doesn't really want the attention and notoriety, and without their permission we really can't talk about those individuals. But I can tell you that there was a young man that had gone through CPR classes at Columbus State University as part of a class that he was taking, and they told him about the Pulse Point app. He was leaving a local restaurant, and as he was walking out of the restaurant, his phone indicated, Pulse Point, that there was somebody in the same restaurant that needed CPR. And he walked in, and there was a bunch of people standing around looking at this individual on the ground, and he stepped up and gave CPR and saved this person's life. And our medics weren't too far away, but his participation made all the difference. So I've seen it, and that's just one of several examples. But and then I would say, even if you don't get the app, we would encourage you to get the app. But we had a pretty important person with the city who collapsed in an alley walking down the street, and somebody witnessed it and called 911, and another person saw it and began the CPR. And so those two individuals, bystanders, not being trained, but they both jumped in, they did something immediately about what they saw, and it saved that person's life. So it's really good, and we're just encouraging people that it's nothing to be afraid of, and we're not worried about germs just pressing on somebody's chest, and you can be a hero. It doesn't take much.
Yeah, that's really inspiring. So like Pulse Point is kind of like the new stop, drop, and roll, right?
It is. As much as we tried to explain fire safety to kids as we were, growing up, and our numbers of fires continue to decrease over time. So I think we're all kind of becoming a little smarter with fire safety awareness. Now it's kind of healthcare awareness. And so the CPR, AED, and Pulse Point is the new stop, drop, and roll.
We do just a quick review of how you're supposed to place your hands. It's one hand over the other, right? And then
yeah. So the rib cage is right here, and this is the nipple line, and then right over here is the sternum. And you kind of want the palm of your hand right in the middle of the nipple line.
Oh, okay.
And above this notch. And this is something called the xiphoid process, and we want to keep our hands above this area. So we want to keep it up here. But just kind of anywhere in that general area, so center line, chest. And if you don't see all this visually, you can just kind of guess right in the middle of the chest, and you can feel a sternum and where that bone's kind of notched in there, and then one hand over the other, like you said.
Thank you, Battalion Chief, for coming in today and informing us what we can do as a community to, help save lives and make that much of a difference. If you are interested in getting more information on CPR AED courses, the Pulse Point app, or the Columbus Pulse Point AED registry, go to the Division of Fire website at www.columbus.gov/public-safety/fire. Thanks for watching City Chat on CTV.